If I was going to ask you to describe the two fellas in the image behind me, you'd probably say, well, they're obviously prisoners, they're in prison. They seem quite young, maybe they're in a youth offending institute, perhaps they're in for knife crime, maybe they're off to their cells to take spice or whatever it is prisoners do nowadays. We could speculate quite a lot about this image, but I'd be really surprised if anyone suggested that one or even both of these young men were fathers. Yet there's a surprising number of young men in youth offending institutes and prisons in this country who are fathers or about to be fathers. And when I say young, I mean from teenagers up to the age of 21. There aren't actually any official statistics, but most research suggests around 25% of young men in prison are dads. And that's what I found really intriguing. A quarter of young men in prison are dads or about to become dads, but yet when I looked into it, we don't really know very much about them. Most research about parents in prison is either about mums or about the children of prisoners. So why the resounding silence about dads, and more particularly young dads? So that's why last year I spent some time in prison, which I have to admit I did enjoy, and I spoke to 15 young men aged between 17 and 21 who are dads or about to become dads. And they all had very different stories to tell. Some of them had more than one children, one of them was a stepdad, some of them saw their children regularly, a few of them had never actually even met their own children. But one thing was clear from all of the interviews, and that's what these young men loved being fathers. Their faces lit up when they spoke about their children, and they had big ambitions, big aspirations to be the best dad, to be a role model, to get a good job, to never come to jail again. And for many of them, the hope was that they would just be a better dad than their own father had been. But their experience of being a father inside, they were difficult and complex, and they were often hampered by logistics, legal matters, and lost relationships. And to a certain extent, they were also hampered by that silence. Some of them told me I was the first person they'd ever spoken to about their children. So that silence was coming from lots of different areas. It wasn't just that they weren't asked about being fathers, they didn't talk about it either. It was just easier for them never to mention their children. I'm in the final stage of writing up my research, and I'm afraid you're going to have to wait until I've written it for any more themes and ultimate conclusions. But one thing I keep coming back to is that we really shouldn't have a silence about these young men, these young dads, because they'll be prisoners for a while, but they'll be dads for life. And if that's not acknowledged, then how can they be the good dads that some of them so desperately want to be? Thank you.